For as long as there have been people on this planet, there have been stories, and everyone has a story to tell. From simple cave drawings to lush Renaissance paintings, people have often used art to tell these stories. An increasingly popular method of modern-day storytelling is that of the graphic novel, in which not only pictures are used to tell a story, but also paneling and typography. With each page meticulously designed to appeal to the reader's emotions and aesthetics, graphic novels take the whole scope of storytelling and kick it up a notch. This unit of study is meant to engage high school students with the concept of design in the art classroom by examining and then practicing the techniques found in graphic novels. Half of one marking period, where the students meet for 45 minutes 5 times a week, should be sufficient time to cover the material presented in this unit. The duration of each lesson is at the discretion of the individual teacher, but 3 classes can be set aside, though, if extra time is needed in any of the lessons. For the purposes of this unit, students will imagine themselves as a freelance illustrator and designer who have been commissioned by the editor of a children's educational magazine to produce a one-page comic that tells a story based on an emotion. The teacher will assume the role of the editor and assign a specific emotion to each student that they then must convey using pictures, panels, and typography. By focusing on the concept of design and the big idea of storytelling, students will examine design aesthetics, reference books about graphic novels and typography, and ultimately create their own one-page comic strip. In putting forth maximum participation in each of the following lessons described, students will better understand the impact good design can have on communication and discover what it is like to work for a client in the art world. The first lesson of this unit will act as an introduction to the concept of storytelling through graphic novels. The students will be given a page of text from the independent reader young adult novel Alex Rider's Stormbreaker, and a student or two will be asked to read the page aloud in class. Then the students will be given that same page of the story, but interpreted through the graphic novel version. This will allow students to see how the same story can be told through different methods and techniques. By using a book that most students are familiar with and allowing them to see how it can be told in different ways will make the upcoming lessons about design and storytelling all the more personable and relatable to them. An in-class discussion about the concept of storytelling, and more specifically using graphic novels to tell stories, will be undertaken immediately following the brief preparatory activity. After the discussion, the students will then assume the role of freelance illustrators and designers, and the teacher, acting as the editor of a children's educational magazine, will assign each student an emotion that must be conveyed through a story in a one-page comic strip. The students can then begin the ideation process by using concept maps and matrices to create multiple solutions to the main problem at hand. During this time, students can also sort through a collection of comic books, graphic novels, and manga provided by the teacher for reference purposes. Students should continue the ideation process both at home and in class until they've narrowed down a story, a setting, and characters that they feel can effectively be designed to communicate the emotion they've been assigned. The students, acting as the freelance illustrator and designers, will take their ideas to the teacher who, acting as the editor and client, will either approve their idea or suggest that they go back and work out some kinks. Students must have their idea approved before moving on to the visualization process. During the second lesson, students will start the visualization process of creating their comic strip. Focus and importance will now be placed on style, where students will design and refine the look of their characters and setting. Students should create multiple character concept sketches that show their characters from different angles and perspectives, as well as in different colors and artistic styles. The comic books, graphic novels, and manga from the previous lessons will still be available for students to draw inspiration or direction from if needed. For efficiency purposes, photocopiers or scanners can be used to run off numerous copies of the students' character concept sketches when it comes time to create color comps. From there, students can hone in on a specific style that they like and begin to refine their characters. Once a style, look, and color combination have been achieved, students should seek the advice and approval of the teacher, again acting as the client, before moving any farther with their comic strip. Time should also be taken during this lesson to make sure the students' stories are as strong as they can be before moving on to the prototyping process. Each student should type a paragraph or two at the most, summarizing their emotion-based story. Students can handwrite notes along the margins too, suggesting possible solutions on how to visually convey specific parts of their story. For the third lesson, students will utilize all that they have learned so far about storytelling, graphic novels, and design, and begin to fully visualize their one-page comic strip. Focus should now shift to the process of designing a page layout. Several books about design techniques for graphic novels will be available for students to reference, as well as teacher-provided assortment of books, comic books, graphic novels, and manga. Students should ask themselves how they want to visually convey their story. Does their story seem better suited with a slow, static panel design or something that's a bit more dynamic? By carefully examining the design techniques for panel ordering and placement, students will make an aesthetic choice that complements and enhances their own style and story. Using task boards, students can cut out panels of any shape and experiment with the page layout before committing their design to paper. It is important that students design their page layout simultaneously with their art. Panels shouldn't be created specifically for an image, nor should an image be specifically drawn to fit in a panel. The creative process here should be very fluid-like. It is at this point that students should also take into consideration typography and text boxes. They should ask themselves what type of font would best suit the visual nature of their comic strip and whether they should hand letter their text or produce it using Adobe design software. Students will engage in letting and kerning exercises that will help them become more familiar with the font they have chosen, as well as learn how to keep their text boxes looking aesthetically well designed. Once students have tied up any loose ends concerning their art, the panel design and or the typography, they can create a mock-up of their one-page comic strip to submit to the teacher for final approval. Well, we're almost there. The fourth and final lesson is where the students finally get to create their one-page comic strip. Students will use the mock-up they created during the prototyping process to create a final version of their comic strip. There are many ways students can go about creating their final product. They can use illustration board and any media they wish to create the comic strip manually. They can scan their mock-up into the computer and create their final version digitally, or they can do a combination of both. Likewise, the typography can be done similarly. Students can hand letter the text or produce the text digitally through Adobe design software. Ultimately, no matter what method or combination of methods they use, students will utilize all the elements of design they have learned throughout the entire unit to create a single finished piece that is visually pleasing, well-designed, and appealing to the target audience. After each student completes their one-page comic strip, they should compose in their journal a summative entry that takes into account all that they have learned about the design process. What did they enjoy? What did they find to be a struggle? Was any part of the design process redundant? And how did they feel about creating artwork not necessarily for them, but for a client? And now that the students have completed their comic strips, it's time to celebrate their work. Each student should be given the opportunity to present their one-page comic strip to the class and talk about it. Afterwards, students can pin their work along the wall and examine the diversity of design, styles, and emotions. Allow time for students to discuss how their work looks next to each other and what they liked or disliked about the unit overall.